Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. Just got back from Crypto.com Arena, where the Lakers fell 128 to 106 to drop to 20-11 on the season. They remain number 5 in the West, though they are technically tied with the Minnesota Timberwolves, and they drop now to 7-8 against teams 500 or better on the season. Another blowout loss against a younger, quicker, faster, more athletic team that, this one was actually close through the first 3 quarters, even into the beginning of the 4th quarter. I thought there was a lot to be encouraged by through the first 3 and 3.25 part of the game, right? Like 3 quarters plus the first like couple minutes of the 4th. Then the Lakers completely let go of the rope in a way that we're accustomed to earlier in games and sometimes in the first half or the 3rd quarter in some of these blowout losses. But this time it happened over a few minute stretch between about the 9-ish minute mark and the 5-minute mark of the 4th quarter. And the game goes from, they're right there. I mean, they had tied the game at 79-79. There was a couple minutes left in the 3rd. They're down 86-84 after Luka hits a step back 3. And from that point on, they just get absolutely blitzed and they can't run a functional offense. They're turning the ball over left and right. They're taking contested threes. They're not getting to the rim. And then on the other end, Detroit is getting to the rim at will. And I'm going to spoil, well, I'll save my stat of the night for the stat of the night portion. But it's a very bad stat that to me was indicative of just how this game went. But the Lakers, despite in some regards, like playing better defense for stretches, and I think having better balance with the starting group, starting a couple Banshees due to Rui and Austin both being out, they still could not stop this Pistons team. They could not contain the ball. Their communication on screening coverages, in switches, off-ball defense. There were so many times where there'd be like a simple action, where the Pistons would reverse it, and then the player who's reversing the ball from the wing just cuts, and the wing defender just loses their man and gives up a back cut for a layup or a driving kick opportunity. Just so many simple things that just continue to be really concerning with this team, especially against this type of opponent, which unfortunately for the Lakers is a lot of the top teams in the NBA. There are some slower teams. There are some teams that they match up better with, but the unfortunate reality for them is just the best teams in the NBA have such a convincing athleticism gap against them that unless the Lakers are having an incredible shooting performance, and it's tough to do that 4 times in a 7-game series, unless they're taking care of the ball at an incredibly high rate and also having a remarkable shot-making night, it's looking like it's impossible for them to beat any of these types of teams, the Houstons, the Detroits. San Antonio, they obviously beat them earlier in the season, but there was no Fox and Harper. And San Antonio has been a much better team since getting back Fox in particular, but also Harper off the bench. He's been huge for them. So that one, like San Antonio at full strength or closer to full strength, obviously blitzed the Lakers. And then we have the OKC performance earlier in the season, a couple of the recent Phoenix losses. So the Lakers have been getting blown out left and right against some of these, not even elite, because I thought this Detroit team, that if I'm looking at it from a Pistons perspective, outside of that few minute stretch, that there were certainly some stretches to be concerned by with their shot making, their turnovers, their free throw shooting, their half court offense at times. But they ended up blowing the Lakers out because the Lakers continue to have these stretches where they just completely collapse and for whatever reason get blitzed in like 3 to 4 minute increments, and the game is just blown completely wide open. But before we get into it, shout out to the Late Night Gang, shout out to the chat. I appreciate you guys tuning in after another blowout loss. This is why I will state, sometimes I feel like I'm being a wet blanket or I'm being too negative, but like this was why I said what I said going into the Sacramento game and even coming out of the Sacramento game of just the sentiment of like, yes, that was a nice win. It was nice to see the Lakers have a blowout. It was nice to see them be focused for nearly 48 minutes, but we need to see this more consistently, which I do think tonight was a step in the right direction in that regard. Like they continued the focus and the effort and the urgency for, again, roughly 3 quarters or so, but they weren't able to get over the hump. They weren't able to get over the finish line. And a loss is a loss. So I don't want to say like a 6-point loss, like a 6-point loss is better than a 20-point loss just because of net rating, point differential. And you want to see the team have a certain level of fight for a full 48 minutes. But I think the Lakers like almost need a crunch time loss or some sort of close loss here because they continue to just get blown out and absolutely waxed when they lose. And that is going to lead me to Buha's big picture, which, to be honest, I was a little stumped coming up with my big picture takeaway because I feel like, after the Spurs game, we talked about the Lakers' fatal flaw, which has been speed and athleticism in opponents. They get ran off the floor and they just look like they're playing a different sport and don't belong. Then after the Houston game, that was the big crash out game where it was like something has to change. Looking at the front office and ownership, looking at the coaching, looking at the stars, looking at just some of the key role players. Like everybody has to be better. Everybody has to do something about this and make some changes. So I will reiterate both of those points of the Lakers continue to look helpless against quicker, more athletic opponents. And like that is a real concern at this point where again, they're not even like, it'd be one thing if like they lost some close games to those types of teams. And it was sort of like, hey, this is like sort of their weakness, right? Like this is something that they have to figure out. They're getting blown out by all these teams in a really concerning way. And I still go back to like the roster construction. They need more two-way players. They need more athleticism. They need more shooting. They have a lot of needs right now. The coaching staff, like I think some of these adjustments in the game plan could be better. I thought especially offensively with how much Detroit ices and how much like they were blitzing and trapping and doubling. And the Lakers really like they did have some nice moments where they were able to find lobs, or able to find cuts, able to find weak side skip passes, but they also had so many turnovers against a style of defense that they were honestly faring better against early in the season or earlier in the season, and just could not capitalize against Detroit. Like this was not the drop coverage we've seen that has stymied the Lakers. This was actually a lot more. I mean, even some switching Duren onto Luka or LeBron or whoever, but also a lot of showing high and putting 2 on the ball, and LA just couldn't consistently capitalize. So all those points remain, but my big picture point off of this one is the floor is lava. And I'm going to have a little bit of fun with this because I know everything's doom and gloom right now, and I totally get it, but I'm going to reference the kids game show on Netflix right now. And now I'm going to get into a depressing point. I'm sorry. The floor is lava. And what I mean by this is the Lakers simply have one of the lowest floors in the NBA right now. And it's really alarming for a team that is this good, that has this high of a ceiling, that has the top end talent they have with Luka and Austin and LeBron, that is number 5 in the Western Conference, like clearly the tougher conference, and has won at a rate where they look like a 50+ win team. At the same time, when the Lakers lose, they lose big. Every game this season has been by double figures. And the shout out to Pickup Hoop who tweeted this after the game at me. This stat just blows my mind right now. The Lakers are tied for the 3rd most 20-point losses on the season at 6. And for some perspective here, I believe there's 6. There's 2 teams tied for 2nd, and then two teams tied for 3rd. So those 5 teams that, like, I think one team's been blown out 8 times, then there's 7, then there's 6. Those 5 teams, the other 4 teams are lottery teams. That they're the Utahs, the Brooklyns, the Washingtons, and I forget the other one off the top of my head. The Lakers are in that mix with that group, and they have more 20-point losses, then the Nuggets have double-digit losses, then the Rockets have double-digit losses. So like, and you know, I've already referenced this, but like looking at their losses compared to the rest of the top of the West, those teams just don't get blown out anywhere close to as often as the Lakers do. And right now they're not getting blown out by like bad teams. They're getting blown out by good teams. And I would argue that's almost more concerning, because at least against bad teams, you could argue there's a focus issue. They just kind of no-showed. They didn't really whatever, right? They're getting blown out by a lot of the good teams right now. And that continues, like this just concerning trend with their losses. But they have 3 times as many 20-point losses as they do 20-point wins. They have 6 20-point losses on the season, 2 20-point wins on the season. That is bad. That is concerning. And once again, after tonight, they're the only playoff team with a negative point differential and a negative net rating in either conference. So among the 16 playoff teams right now, they are the worst, at least in terms of not going by wins, losses, but actual like margin of victory. They are bottom, you know, the 16th ranked team. So JJ was asked about this after the game, and he sidestepped the question and started referencing like intent, and we had good intent tonight, but then he went back to the turnovers and the fast break points and the points in the paint, and didn't really have a reason. Like, I thought the most damning thing he said after the game was that he doesn't feel like the Lakers have an identity right now. He doesn't know what their DNA is. And he said he had a conversation with Phil Jackson early last season, and that Phil told him, you typically know your team by Thanksgiving. Coincidentally, I actually was talking to someone yesterday who referenced that, and they actually said Phil would say that about Christmas time, not Thanksgiving time. But regardless, we are past Thanksgiving, we are past Christmas time, we are here now, and you have the head coach of this team saying that he does not know what the identity of this team is, despite them being 5th in the West, despite them being 20-11. Right? You could look at that a couple ways. You could take a glass half full approach of, hey, they've won in spite of the injuries, in spite of some of the adversity they're facing, and they've been able to stack wins. And JJ did reference last season that they didn't really form that identity until like mid to late January. So maybe it's a similar situation where in the next 2 to 4 weeks, this group comes together in a more sustainable way and shows a level of identity or consistency that we've yet to really see. But I didn't love hearing that. I don't disagree with him for what it's worth. But then you could also look at the glass half empty approach of like, you know, they have won in spite of that, but you shouldn't be almost halfway through a season and feeling like you don't have a clear identity. And to be honest, like it looks like that when they're playing some of these teams. It looks like outside of relying on Luka or relying on LeBron, relying on Austin to try to save them in certain stretches and to just basically be great, like that sometimes feels like the game plan at times. It's like, let's just hope Luka has a 40-point triple-double. Let's just hope LeBron has a 30-point triple-double. Let's hope Austin drops 30 and 10. Like that can't be the strategy here, right? You know, being a little reductive here in my analysis, but it's just, you know, I don't know. I'm running out of ways to break this down, because I think it's just very simple that this team does not match up well with teams that have a certain athleticism gap over them. And that's not most of the bad team. Well, most teams have an athleticism gap over them, but like you do need a certain level of execution and a certain level of personnel and like star power to beat the Lakers. So again, like they beat the bad teams, they beat most of the mediocre teams, but now we are having this troubling trend of when they play the good teams, they're getting ran off the floor. And even a game like tonight was looking like an exception of, hey, maybe they're going to lose by 6, 8, 10. They are shorthanded. No Austin, no Rui, no Gabe. Okay, like that's a decent loss against the best team in the East. But then they have that stretch and they can't get back into the game, and it's a 22-point loss. So I'm not going to hammer that anymore. I said my piece. Let's get into notable performers. We'll start with, so again, no Austin, no Rui, no Gabe. LA starts Jake LaRavia in place of Rui Hachimura. Luka had 30 points, 5 rebounds, and 11 assists. but 9 for 22 shooting, including 3 for 11 on threes, 9 for 13 on free throws, and 8 turnovers. Just way too many turnovers from Luka, including a couple during that stretch where the game went off the rails. I thought, like, it's hard to. You certainly put some of it on Luka. I also thought the Lakers' approach and game plan offensively, as I mentioned earlier, with how Detroit guards ball screens, I thought the supporting cast was not doing Luka many favors. And also, I think this is a game where the Lakers missed Austin and Rui as offside or weak side off ball threats in terms of. Like, I mean, JJ said not too long ago when Austin went out that Austin is their best off-ball player. I don't know if that I fully agree with that, but I can see that. Why I could see why he said that. But Rui's obviously one of the Lakers' best off-ball players as well. He's their best shooter and is a good cutter. So that combination of missing that level of offensive talent against this defense, this level of athleticism, this level of physicality, the Pistons, JJ said it pregame, the Pistons foul you like 3 to 4 times a possession, and the refs just can't call every single foul. So he told the team they needed to play through that. They needed to play with a certain level of physicality. So I don't place the entire the entirety of the 8 turnovers on Luka or LeBron's 5 turnovers, which I'm about to touch on both those guys. Like, certainly there were some that were egregious. There were some that were inexcusable. There were some that is entirely on them, and they both need to be better in that regard. But also some of it was the Lakers spacing, certain guys not cutting in a timely manner or not making themselves big enough. And it's not just cutting through the spot, but it's also keeping the guy behind you, making sure your elbows are out and taking up space to actually receive the ball. So I thought they had a combined 13 turnovers between those two. I would have to go back and watch every single one, but I would say at least a few of those were not entirely on them, right? Like, it's always on the passer to a degree because you're making the read, you're making the decision to pass the ball. But sometimes, like a quarterback, right? You see a passing lane and you make the throw, and then maybe the receiver has the cornerback or whoever on their hip, and then they let them get in front of them, get that inside position, and that's when a pass gets tipped or intercepted or whatever. So it goes both ways. I do put certainly more than half of the blame on those two, but I also thought the game plan tonight was not as sharp as it should have been offensively, and then also I thought some of the guys receiving some of these passes didn't do the best job. But Luka, I mean, like, big game from a counting stats perspective, but the 9 for 22 shooting, 3 for 11 on threes, missing a few free throws, the 8 turnovers, like, he continues to struggle with efficiency and turnovers. And that has been a more recent trend with him over the past couple of weeks. Then you had LeBron, 17, 4 and 4, 1 steal, 1 block, 5 turnovers for him. So more turnovers than assists. That is a no-go from LeBron. 6 for 17 shooting, 3 for 10 on threes, 2 for 5 on free throws. So really with both players, like, I was considering talking about the stars in terms of making that the big picture takeaway. It goes in line again with one I spoke about after the Houston game of the stars need to be better as well. This is partly on them. Like, LeBron has not been rebounding the ball as well lately. He's also had his fair share. I mean, he's been taking care of the ball better, but he will have sometimes a high turnover game here or there. The shot has not been there, right? I think like 10 threes for him is pretty high with how poorly he's been shooting the ball during some of these recent games. Then he also missed several free throws. So both guys I thought could have been better in multiple areas of, I think, settling at times for questionable shots, turning the ball over too much, and also missing their free throws. And then that's before factoring in the defensive end, which I thought particularly early, LeBron was in a lot of the Lakers breakdowns. I thought he was better during the middle portion of the game, but he continues to be a culprit sometimes of not rotating over or not boxing out, etc. DeAndre Ayton, I'm going to save DeAndre Ayton for later, but 10 points, 2 rebounds, 5 of 8 shooting for Deandre. I believe he didn't get his first rebound until like late in the third quarter. Might have even been beginning of fourth. I want to talk about a troubling trend with Deandre and some of these losses. Marcus Smart, 6 points, 2 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals. Did struggle with foul trouble and was pretty aggressive in that regard, but I thought had some really good defensive moments. I like that he's taken a step back offensively during the stretch and has taken on more of a playmaking role. And I think has really brought a certain level of defense and energy to the starting group, which tonight, coupled with Jake LaRavia, who had 9 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, 4 steals and a block, a couple turnovers, 3 for 9 shooting, like putting the offense aside, because those guys combined to shoot 4 for 13. I thought they both brought a certain level of defense that I want to touch on that a little bit later as well. But I like those guys offensively are going to be up and down. They're going to have turnovers. They're going to miss open threes. That's just part of who they are as players. But I like the force that they played with defensively tonight. And Marcus as the primary guy on Cade, they were trying to get him switched off of Cade, and that is something that the Lakers continue to struggle with. Is just if you put a good defender on a star, the team is just going to simply switch that player off because of how the Lakers defend. And then Jake playing passing lanes, being an off-ball threat, like defensively, I thought that was big tonight. Off the bench, Vando, another really impressive game from Vando. 8 points, 3 for 3 shooting, 2 for 2 on threes. Both were timely threes. 8 rebounds, 4 offensive rebounds. I thought on the ball, like Marcus and Vando as the 2 on-ball guys tonight, I thought were really effective and disruptive. There was a lot of Cade having to give the ball up or Ivy having to give the ball up with their full court pressure or 3/4 court pressure, half court pressure, depending on the possession. Vando did his job tonight. I think the off-ball defense is the one thing where I reference like guys getting back cut. Vando does get back cut a lot and he is so focused on shading over toward the ball handler and being in help that he can have blinders sometimes and doesn't see his man cutting behind him or relocating to the corner. So that continues to be an area that he can be better in, but it's hard to quibble with the way that Vando's been playing. I think he's doing his job. And really, I think the Banshees have largely been doing their jobs despite some obvious offensive limitations. Jackson Hayes, I thought he had an effective offensive game, 5 for 5, 3 for 5, free throw line, right? So he had an and one and then a couple trips to the line. So pretty effective around the rim. And whenever LA was actually able to get downhill and create some of these opportunities, like Jackson feasted on that. I thought he had a pretty rough defensive game. I will note, I thought Deandre had a rough defensive game as well. Again, I'm going to touch on him in a second. But I thought Jackson, he got beat at the rim a lot tonight. And it felt more like an early Lakers tenure Jackson Hayes performance defensively rather than a more recent performance of like the past year where he's been much better on the defensive end. Nick Smith Jr. had a really rough go tonight. 3 points, 1 for 6 shooting, 0 for 3 on threes. Even missed the free throw, which he's a pretty good free throw shooter. This is why he's a two-way player, and this is why I don't know if he can be counted on every single night. I like the approach offensively in particular. Defensively, he's clearly limited. And this matchup, like, there was just not a great matchup for him defensively. All of Detroit's guards are way more athletic and physical than him. And I think we've seen some of his defensive limitations. But yeah, he was part of some of especially in that first half, a little bit of that rough stretch where the Lakers, they were right there and then they started to fall down by a bit more. And then Maxi Kleba, I don't really get why he played the 8 minutes he played tonight. Jackson was back, and I was kind of wondering if Jackson was maybe on a minutes restriction, but he played 18 minutes, which is pretty much in line with what he plays when he's at full strength and when DeAndre's there. And one of those two was on the floor at all times. So I wasn't quite like they went to the double big look, which I know has had some success, but Maxi, I thought was just too slow for this matchup. And then also is just not an offensive threat right now. So I think he should be out of the rotation. And again, I continue to say when we're getting to the Maxey Dalton part of the rotation, I think that's when you cross the line into like Adu has to play. That's where, all right, Vando obviously has established himself or reestablished himself recently. Jackson is the backup center. Nick Smith earned a certain opportunity because of his last performance. But then once we start getting into the rest of the rotation, whether it's Dalton or Maxey or Bronny, Adu has to be the next man up, in my opinion, just because of what this team is lacking on defense and in athleticism. In terms of stat of the night, here's the stat of the night that is a pretty alarming stat. The Detroit Pistons had 74 points in the paint. That alone is bad, but they made 48 shots tonight. All 37 of their shots that were 2-pointers, all 37 shots that they made inside the arc were in the paint. And so the Pistons made 48 shots. 37 of them were in the paint. The other 11 were threes. And so no mid-range shots or mid-range makes from the Pistons. Everything was in the paint, and most of that was at the rim or at least within 5 feet. So that, to me, like, this was probably the Lakers. Probably. This was the Lakers' worst rim protection game of the season, worst interior defense game of the season, and nothing highlights that to me more than that. It was a literal layup line, and yes, there was some flair with the layups. There were some reverses and some dunks. Javonte Green's putback dunk in, I believe that was the first quarter, was ridiculous, but the Pistons were living at the rim, and the Lakers could not keep them away from there. And of course, some of that was pick sixes, some of that was transition, but a lot of that was in the half court and just them straight line drives to the rim or back cuts into space. It was a bit of a mess defensively. Then I'm going to go through these final 3 takeaways relatively quickly because I don't really want to touch on a lot of this stuff anymore. Takeaway number 1 is the starters, by my accounting, were a 0 in 12 minutes. And that's not, you don't want to celebrate mediocrity, but for how bad the starters have been in a lot of these games against good teams, you take that as like a mini win of, hey, they didn't get blitzed in their minutes together. They actually held their own in the 2 shifts that they had to begin the game and in the third quarter. And one of my takeaways, or as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about coming off this game, I wanted to highlight, like, I thought the starting group looked a lot better having 2 Banshees out there. And that's not realistic, at least with the current roster construction when at full strength, because the Lakers are going to start the big 3. They're going to start Ayton. But I think looking at the Sacramento game and the fact that the starters won their minutes with that, with 1 Banshee in the lineup, and then tonight having 2 Banshees in the lineup, or defenders, but whatever, I know some people don't like the Banshee term. Defenders, we could say, a little bit more offense defense balance. I thought that the starting group looked better. And again, I'm not saying 0, being a neutral in 12 minutes is this big positive, but compared to a lot of these blowout losses, the Lakers starting group has been a minus 10 or worse in like 12 to 15 minutes. Like, they're getting blown out in their shifts together. This is a step in the right direction in the sense of, I think this needs to be something that they internalize, of like, they have shifted the full strength starting group far too much in the offensive side of things. And like, when the Lakers, Crane just was tweeting about this in terms of, I think you see a big boost from 0 defenders to 1 defender. Then you see another boost from 1 defender to 2 defenders. Once you get to 3, it kind of depends on the lineup and who else is out there, who are the other 2 players offensively. But as I've been talking about for the last few games, I think the blueprint moving forward needs to be 2 offensive-minded perimeter players, 2 defensive-minded perimeter players, and a center. And I thought tonight, again, like, they did not lose the starting minutes. They got walloped in the rest of the minutes when they started to bring the bench in, and the bench is currently very limited offensively. So I thought that was encouraging. And Smart and LaRavia, just their playmaking, like just in the first 6 minutes or so, Smart had 2 steals. LaRavia had a steal on a block. There were multiple times that they rotated over or got back in transition. And it's very like baseline level stuff of what you want from your role players, what you want from your supporting cast. But those guys do that. And now I think there was a hit offensively, of course, going from Austin and Rui to Marcus and Jake. Those guys are not the level of ball handler or playmaker that Austin is. They're not the level of shooter that Rui is. So certainly the offense took a bit of a hit, but I thought the defense was notably better. And having Marcus as the point of attack guy on Cade, and then having Jake as a helper and as a bit of a freelancer and defensive playmaker was really effective. So in a change of tune, I liked the 2 shifts we saw from the starters tonight. Takeaway number 2 is a troubling Ayton trend. I don't know why I said his name so odd, but I've noticed that in losses, there is a really big gap in Deandre Ayton's performance. And this is not even factoring in tonight's game, but this was going into tonight's game. In wins, Deandre Ayton is averaging 17 points and 10 rebounds in 30 minutes. In losses, he's averaging 10 points and 7 rebounds in 29 minutes. So sometimes when you see some of these splits or in wins versus losses, it's like a big gap of maybe it'd be like 34 minutes versus like 25 minutes. And of course, there's going to be a gap there. He's playing 1 fewer minute in losses. Like the Lakers have tended to keep their players in losses despite getting blown out or whatever. And that's a notable drop from 17 points to 10 points and from 10 rebounds to 7 rebounds. Then you look at his free throw percentage falls off a cliff from 68% to 29%. Field goal percentage drops from 74% to 64%. True shooting percentage, 74% to 63%. Usage is down a little bit. So if you want to provide the counter of, hey, maybe he's not as involved offensively because the Lakers are turning the ball over, or it is a more star concentrated game, I will entertain that. But there's also a giant split here with his individual net rating of the Lakers are plus 23 or have a plus 23 net rating in wins with Deandre Ayton. This is all off Basketball Reference, and a minus 18 net rating in losses with Deandre Ayton. So part of that is just like the team wide performance. And he's obviously playing with the starters in some of these games, but you can look at plus 9.9 in wins versus minus 20.3 in losses. But there's been a big drop off for Deandre specifically in a lot of these losses. And I do want to highlight some of the big losses because I think it's like, okay, the Lakers in general have had some bad losses, that they've had some blowouts. Okay, I don't want to make too much of them losing versus Portland at the beginning of the season when there's no Luka, no LeBron. I think it was no Gabe, no Marcus. Like they barely had ball handlers out there. They were relying on Nick Smith and Dalton and Bronny to run the second unit. It's like, okay, I'm not going to hold that against DeAndre Ayton. But I think it is notable and it is interesting and just something I'm going to be monitoring against OKC. 6 points, 5 rebounds against, then the Lakers had the 7-game win streak. So everything was going well, but then coming out of that against Phoenix, 12 points, 9 rebounds against Boston, 6 points, 10 rebounds against San Antonio, 11 points, 8 rebounds against Phoenix, the most recent blowout, 12 and 10 against Houston, 10 and 2. And remember, like he got thoroughly dominated by Şengün and Adams. And then tonight, I thought 10 and 2 again. Like this is now back-to-back blowout losses to elite, athletic, quick, young teams where he has been non-existent on the glass, and he still will get his little lobs or little deep post seals and turnarounds and whatnot. But I think that he has not been anywhere close to as impactful in those games as he is against some of these lottery teams or some of these mediocre teams. And I think in my opinion, his 3 worst games of the season, like even numbers aside, just looking at what I felt were his worst performances were OKC, Houston, and tonight against Detroit. And one of the commonalities among all 3 teams is they are all giant, they are all physical, they're all tough, they're all athletic. And so this is like another, and to be clear, I don't want to put this all on Deandre. I'm not saying by any means that he is the reason why the Lakers have lost these games. There have been much bigger issues with the scheme, with adjustments, with the rotation, with the starters, with the stars. There's a lot of factors just with the roster that there's a lot of reasons why the Lakers have lost these games, but I do include him as a reason. And I think this is starting to be a bit of a troubling trend that he has really struggled against the best teams, with the lone exception where I do want to give him proper credit is the San Antonio game on November 5th. That was the game that Wemby played in. I thought he outplayed Wemby. He had 22 and 10. He had a couple blocks, really good defense in that game. So he does have a game on his docket where he has been awesome against a more athletic, better opponent. Again, no Fox, no Harper, but still Wemby played in that game. But I also look at OKC, Houston, Detroit as like, it wasn't just, because I'm not basing this off of the offense. I'm actually more so talking about the defense and the rebounding. Like the offense can come and go depending on how involved he is. And when the Lakers are turning the ball over 20 plus times, he's not going to get the ball as much. But I think for me, it's been the low floor defensively and sort of getting pushed around and like not really being a factor on the glass. That is where my antenna starts to perk up and there's a little bit of an alarm there. So I just wanted to note that I feel like this has quietly been a trend that I haven't really discussed yet of Deandre has had some pretty subpar performances against some of the better teams in these blowout losses. And he is, if there ever is, or among the players who could actually offset an off night from Luka or an off night from LeBron or Austin, like in theory, Deandre is the 4th option. So if Austin doesn't have it and he's having one of his nights that he's had against some of these physical teams, or Luka's having a bunch of turnovers, or LeBron's having an off shooting night, Deandre, I feel like should be a guy you could turn to and expect more of or ask more of. And I just don't think we've seen that against some of these elite teams. And then third and final takeaway is Rui injury update. So Rui is going to be out at least the next 2 games. Which would bring him to about a week absence. The Lakers are hopeful he'll be back in a week, but we do tend to hear that with some of the injury stuff. So we'll see how long he's ultimately out. But I do want to note, I thought they missed him tonight. I still think he is more effective in a bench role and just balancing out the starting group. But I thought the shooting and the cutting and just having a certain level of offensive threat with some of these lineups that they just didn't have when you're going to a Jake or to a Vando, I thought they missed him out there. So they're going to not have him for the next couple of Memphis matchups. I assume the Lakers will stick with the same starters, but I just wanted to provide the latest update on that. With all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. First one from Jackson. Thank you for the super chat. Excuse me. LeBron was not good enough tonight. I agree. I know, and I haven't even mentioned yet, it was LeBron's 40th or time traveling 41st birthday, and he has showed out on his birthday before and had big performances, big wins on his birthday, and tonight what was not the case. But yeah, I mean, I touched on him in the notable performers section, but 17 points on 6 for 17 shooting, 3 for 10 on threes, some really bad turnovers, some bad defense at times, only 4 rebounds, more turnovers than assists. It was not a good LeBron performance overall. I thought it was trending into a decent to solid one, and then it went off the rails in the second half. Intel is wild. Thank you for the super chat. We suck. Let's just wait till this summer and spend our 100 plus around Luka. I'm seeing this sentiment a lot right now, and I get it for those who feel this way. The Lakers have a 5-ish weeks, almost 6 weeks here to try to figure things out. I wouldn't. I don't want to end the season too early, especially because one of my I had several takeaways scrapped because one of my takeaways was going to be the Lakers have this golden opportunity now with Jokic's injury of that I think will have Denver slide in the standings. Like even if they somehow can tread water with like Jonas Valanciunas and Daron Holmes, they're already without 3 other starters. They are now down 4 starters, including I would say, clearly their best player, but also, Murray's their second best player. So 4 of their top 5 players. But especially like Jokic and Gordon in particular, like Jokic, Gordon, and Murray are obviously like the core of that team that has prevailed over the last several years, and not having their best offensive player and their best defensive player, I do expect Denver to slide here a bit and potentially be in that 6 or 7 or maybe even 8 mix by the time that Jokic comes back, depending on when he's back. So that, by process of elimination, bumps the Lakers up where they could be in that, top 4, or Minnesota is playing better. Minnesota's on, nipping at the Lakers' heels right now. So maybe Minnesota ends up jumping them and the Lakers are at 5, but like the Lakers are seemingly locked into a top 5 spot right now at a minimum. And, I don't think with the way they're playing, they're going to be catching San Antonio or Houston necessarily anytime soon, but they're right there with Minnesota, I think, for that like 4-5 battle. And so like if you're in that mix, you do have a shot. Obviously, you don't really want to be in the 4-5 because you play OKC in the second round. But I want to see where they're at in a month from now or so, going into the week leading into the trade deadline. And if it just continues where, look, like they have a really tough San Antonio game coming up, second out of a back-to-back on the road, New Orleans, San Antonio. I think they will likely be heavy underdogs in that game. I'm not sure. Maybe the exception would be if San Antonio is playing the night before. I don't know if they are or not off the top of my head, but they will likely be heavy underdogs in that game. And based on their recent play, probably lose that game. So they will not get over this hump against like the next good team they play, but how they fare, where they're at in the West, and if they can turn things around a bit and finally start beating some good teams, or at least having more competitive showings for larger stretches or like going into a crunch time or something. But I hear you. And look, I think if they slip into like the 6 spot or even the 7 spot somehow, and they're basically a 500 team the rest of the month, then I'm fully with you. Then I think at that point, there's no reason to invest in this. I would even say to this point, like, I think they should only invest if it makes sense to invest in terms of a longer term piece. Like that's where like a Herb Jones, a Keon Ellis, an Ayo DeSumo, I view those guys as guys who could help you in the now, but could also help you in the future and be on like relatively team friendly contracts. Those are the types of guys I still think it's worth trading for, almost regardless of where the Lakers are at in the standings. But a Wiggins, a Brooks, or a more win now type move, in a shorter term move, that's where I'm like, I don't know if it makes as much sense with the way they're trending, but we still got a lot of time left. We'll see. Intel is wild. Thank you for the super chat again. Ayton is good, but 8 million. Ayton is good for 8 million, but not much more. That's the problem with the NBA these days. Yeah, it's funny because I had a mailbag last week, and I talked about, and the Lakers do like have been very pleased with Deandre Ayton, and he's been great in the locker room. The players love him, the coaches love him, and I was talking about them keeping him and what that potential contract could look like. But I did have the giant caveat in there that like, let's see how the rest of the season goes. Let's see how the playoffs go before we start anointing him the center of the future or him making a certain salary. Like as things stand, I think, or at the time as things stood, I think he was looking like a 20-ish, potential $1 million player. But it's been a rough go against some of these elite teams that only further perpetuates the notion that's been out there with him that he can put up numbers, but they can sometimes be empty calories, and that he's not a guy you want. I think Russillo said right after the Lakers signed him, he's not a foxhole guy. And I don't know if I would take it that far, but I've been a bit perturbed instead of alarmed by some of his performances in the big matchups, in the big games against the good teams. I think he has been much better against the lottery teams, and that has helped the Lakers beat those lottery teams, but they also need that version of him against some of these better teams. Zach Wan, thank you for the super chat. Number one, this roster consists of top stars and shit of role players. No balance at all. Two, the offense is reliant on stars' shots, hence it's easier for the team to defend them and the ball not moving enough. So the first point, I agree with the stars point. I think the role players are better than sometimes people give them credit for, but I think one of the core issues with this roster, and I've said this before, is that I think everybody is slotted a little bit too high. Like, the fact of the matter is, I don't think Rui, like, we've had this Rui versus Marcus debate as the fifth starter I've been debating this since July. The fact of the matter is, most of the top, like, Marcus would not start on OKC. He would not start on Houston. He would not start on Denver. He would not start on San Antonio. I don't think he would start on Minnesota. I don't think Rui would start on any of those teams either. So it's like the Lakers already are sort of at a deficit where they're having this fifth starter battle, which, I mean, clearly has not even been a battle because JJ made up his mind. But even the fifth starter battle that they've had has been for players that would not start on any of the other top West teams. That's just a fact. Like, I think the only one you can maybe make an argument for is Minnesota, but even then, I think Dante DiVincenzo is a better player than Marcus Smart. So that's already an issue of, I think Rui and Marcus are good bench players on a good basketball team. The issue for the Lakers is they have to be the fifth and sixth men on the Lakers. And so that's already an improper slotting with those guys. Then I think you just go down the list, and like every bench player is probably a spot higher in the pecking order than they would be on other teams or other good teams with championship ambitions similar to the Lakers. So that's where I think, but then to the point of no balance, that's a big one. It's not just that everyone's slotted probably a spot too high, or in a couple players' cases, maybe a couple spots too high. It's also that most of those guys, like, I mean, JJ just said this after the Sacramento game when he was talking about Nick Smith Jr., and I feel like it kind of got lost. Like, JJ's been taking some shots at the roster and what he has at his disposal, and I totally get it. But he was like, you know, we have a lot of players who are only really good at one thing, and the implication there was the Lakers have a lot of specialists, and that's true, right? Like, Vando is a defensive specialist. The shot's coming along, and that's nice to see, but I need to see a much larger sample size with Vando before I'm like, this dude's a reliable shooter or a reliable offensive player. And even then, he can still struggle with the finishing has been subpar, sometimes the turnovers, whatnot. Then you have Rui, who one of the best shooters in the NBA statistically, awesome true shooting, awesome effective field goal percentage, but he is like you want him as your probably your worst starting defender if he's on a good team. And for the Lakers, he's being asked to be their wing stopper. So that's already like a giant gap in terms of like what he's providing versus what the Lakers need from that spot. Then Marcus, right? Like, really good defensive player, inconsistent offensive player, frustrating offensive player. Jake, similar, right? He had one possession where he had an open three tonight. He doesn't take it. He then pump fakes, does get the drive, but then goes up and gets blocked. And it's like, you should have just taken the three. He continues to struggle with that, and sometimes turnovers as well. Then you just go down the list, and everyone is like much better on one side of the ball. There are very few players who are even close to being good on both sides or like positives on both sides. So I agree with that part, but I do think people have been a little bit too hard on the role players overall. But again, I think everyone's probably slotted a little bit too high. And I think the ideal roster construction would be, we talk about Herb Jones, Andrew Wiggins, Dylan Brooks, whatever. It would honestly be adding that player just to the team and then keeping the rest of the, like, all right, then move Rui. Now Rui's your sixth man, or your Rui versus Marcus is sixth and seventh men. Then it's like Jake and Vando. Then it's Jackson. And like, that's your rotation. That makes a lot more sense. But the Lakers obviously can't just add a starting level 3-and-D guy without giving up real stuff. And the second part, agree. I think that there's way too much just relying on the stars to bail them out. The offense doesn't have a great flow, right? Like they just finished December 29th in defense, which is abysmal, but they're 15th in offense. And like that's kind of the part that I've made this point before. Like the offense continues to kind of get a pass to a degree because the defense has been so bad, but it's like the offense has not been good either. If the Lakers are 15th in offense, they do not have a shot to do anything this year. They need to be a top 5, if not top 3 offense. And having a month of being 15th is just, it's inexcusable. So yeah, I mean, we're starting to see it more. If I'm an opponent, I'm just saying I'm going to make Luka and LeBron and Austin's lives miserable. I'm going to send a certain amount of shading and attention, and depending on your personnel, you could drop, you could blitz, you can hedge, whatever you want to do. But like I'm daring Jake and Vando and Marcus and everybody else to beat me, and I think I'm going to win that bet if I'm an opposing team right now, and they often are winning that bet. Zach Wan, thought on, so I'm going to save the trade stuff for the end of the show. I know I've like sort of touched on it, but I'm going to save the trade specific questions for the end of the Q&A. So I see the next one is, this one's not a trade specific one. It's touching on trades, but not like a specific proposal. Braden said, thank you for Super Chat, Brate. I didn't want to believe it, but you guys were right. Even with 2 trades, this team can't be fixed this year. It's not like Dallas gave Rob the blueprint on how to get Luka to the finals. Oh, wait. Again, I think it depends on who the 2 trades are. I think there is a scenario, my dream, unlikely, but like theoretically there's like a sliver of a chance scenario continues to be if you could find a way to get Herb and Sadiq from New Orleans and then also Keon Ellis. I think that's very, very unlikely, to be clear, and that's why I said a sliver of a chance. But barring something like that, I do think it's hard to field a competitive 2-way rotation. Now, I still think adding that 5th starter and reshaping the rotation would make the Lakers more competitive and just more balanced. And I do think we've seen some better openings from this group when they have a defender in that starting group. But I don't know. I'm still undecided on how I ultimately feel about this. But certainly the thing I will agree with is I do think this team needs a dramatic makeover, and it probably needs to be swapping in multiple players. I think that's to really get to the level they want to get to. I think that's probably the bare minimum. Dome says Lakers need, thank you for Super Chat. Dome, Lakers need to sign Peyton Watson in free agency. I've been thinking about this, and I really like Peyton Watson. I'm curious to see what his number ends up being, but he is someone who checks a lot of the boxes that the Lakers need, and he's someone who's also really developed as a shooter. I think I would have a limit to, like, ideally he's like a $15 million ish player, but he might be playing his way into a bigger contract, and I'd have a little bit of trepidation. But this year he's averaging 11 points, 4.5 rebounds, an assist and a half, a steal, a block, good multi-positional defender, shooting 39% on just under 3 threes a game, 58% on 2s. He's just been getting to the free throw line a little bit more, making his free throws better. Like, he's really taken a step as a scorer, and I wonder just what that could look like in a more like full-time role. And we've seen that, like, he's played really well in Denver in a larger role with Aaron Gordon and then Cam Johnson and Christian Brown being out. I don't think he's the save, right? Like, I think you'd want to, for example, like, you know, maybe he could be, I've talked about, I think the Lakers need a bigger starting wing and then a smaller starting wing, or sort of a 3-4 who's good defensively and versatile defensively. I think he could theoretically be that 4. He's similar mold to a PJ Washington, from a body perspective. I would even say he's more, I think he's probably around the same size, but I would say even more athletic than PJ and a better rebounder than PJ. And then you add in the more point of attack, smaller defender, and then you put those two guys next to Luka and Austin, and I really like that. So depending on the Lakers cap space situation and just financial flexibility, we just don't know yet what's going to happen with LeBron, what's going to happen with Ayton, with Rui, etc. But he is someone in a very limited free agent class. When you look at the names, there's just not a lot out there in general, but also specifically in terms of what the Lakers need. I think Peyton Watson really checks a box, and you'd also be swooping him from Denver. So I do like that. Ayo or Ayo, is Ayo DeSumo in the chat right now? Thank you for the super chat. Adu had more rebounds than Ayton in 22 less minutes. Yeah, again, that's why I talked about Ayton and his recent, not even recent, just his shortcomings in general in some of these bigger bigger games. Like I think he's another one. Like the Lakers as a team are I would like to see more from in some of these big matchups, but Ayton as well. Like I think he needs to be better in some of these big games. Rich says, or thank you for the super chat. Team hasn't been healthy from day one. Impossible to assess. I hear you. And I think that this is probably like the most optimistic glass half full assessment of the group. My pushback would be the starters played in 7 games together and the bench was not always there. But I think any game in which the starters are fully healthy, I consider like, you might have some bench, like, because I'll say like they've had 7 games with the starters, but then they haven't had Gabe, right? And when you hear them talk about their team, they'll be like, oh, well, we've only been full strength like 1 or 2 games all season. And if we're not counting a full strength game because Gabe wasn't there, I'm sorry, I think that's ridiculous. And I just do not agree with that assessment of we can't judge this team because Gabe Vincent is not in the lineup. Again, some of those games, they've had other guys out as well off the bench, and Jackson missed some of those games, and that is a big blow just because of the drop off from Jackson to Maxi Kleba. But I would say like the 7 games I do judge them on in terms of the 7 games they had their starters, and I believe they went 4-3 in those games. But my pushback to this would be, I look at a team like Denver, and I do think they've reached their breaking point in terms of just, okay, yeah, if the Lakers lost Luka for an extended period of time, I'm not going to really judge the Lakers without Luka for an extended period of time. But Denver has been without multiple starters now going on multiple weeks and has continued to find ways to win and just sort of gut out and grind out performances without, while being shorthanded. And they're not, I don't think they're like a much deeper team than the Lakers. I think they struggle with some of the same things. They're like, yes, it was nice to add Bruce Brown, Jonas Valanciunas, Tim Hardaway. Those guys have all helped, but they're not like some, 12 deep, like juggernaut from that perspective. So they've had to play guys who probably shouldn't be playing and have been more so back end rotation guys that have had to be thrust into certain roles. That it's like, I get it to a degree of they've not been healthy. They have been one of the more injured teams in the league. But I also think at some point it becomes a little bit of an excuse. And it also is like, you just have to find a way to win basketball games. And I don't think this team has been able to do that consistently against good teams. And that's just Denver beat Houston without 2 of their starters. Like, I don't think the Lakers do that. The Lakers had their full starters against Houston and got shellacked, right? So I don't know. Like, I hear you though. I hear that like we can't fully assess the group, but you also you have 5 weeks to make a decision on if you're investing in this group or not. And I think at some point we do have to look at, okay, most teams aren't healthy. This group, for various reasons, has really struggled to stay healthy over the last few years. If we're just holding out blind hope that at some point in the future they're going to have like their top 10 players all healthy, I just think you might be holding your breath all season. That just might not be the reality with this group. So you have to assess what we've seen up to this point, and it's been good, but not great. And it's been a bit concerning, to say the least, against good teams. And they've actually been relatively healthy in some, like, okay, they didn't have LeBron against OKC, but OKC didn't have J-Dub. And so maybe you could argue that OKC is deeper and like they need LeBron more than, or the Lakers need LeBron more than OKC needs J-Dub. You could entertain that argument if you want, but like, I don't know. The Houston game was pretty much 2 full-strength teams going at it. Yes, Austin didn't return for the second half, but the game was already basically over at that point. I don't think Austin playing would have swung it. Maybe it's closer. I don't know. I hear you. I'm just a little nervous that if the team takes that approach, like this might be how the team is viewing it. That's at least how what they're saying publicly. I just think it gets into a dangerous territory where you're almost delusionally believing in your team, when I don't need to see everyone fully healthy to know this is not a good defensive team and this is an unathletic team. And that has really reared its head in some of these matchups with good teams. Like, again, Austin and Rui would have helped the offense tonight. They would have hurt the defense. The defense would have been worse with those two out there. So, it's like pick your poison, right? In terms of team performance. So I don't know. I hear you. I just don't fully agree with that. Chuck Dangler, thank you for the super chat. Subrate, not going to talk about the team. We have problems. If we want the chip, we need to fix it. Congrats on having your kid being on TV and looking forward to getting your time fixed for our chat. Late night gang. Yeah, really cool moment. Shout out to Spectrum. Brought my son last night to watch and just get a behind the scenes look at what I do and what it's like to go on TV there and check out the studio and meet everybody. And then for the last segment, they were like, "Hey, do you want to come on the show?" And I wasn't going to make the decision for him, obviously. And he wanted to, and he was ready and he was confident, and I thought he crushed it. So I posted that on my Instagram, posted it on X as well for those who follow me on social. So if you want some lighthearted, feel good in your life, especially after tonight, go check out that video. All right. Jordan asks, is it realistic to spend some of the space this summer on Kessler? Ayton is not the center long term. Imagine he'd be in a non-contract year. It is possible, depending on the number. Probably means LeBron is not back if they have enough cap space to pry a Walker Kessler. The one thing I will note is I think Kessler, I think Kessler's an interesting, and look, he's been my favorite trade target for the last 2 years. So I'm very high on Walker Kessler and his potential fit with the Lakers. He's going to have an interesting market just because of the shoulder situation and him missing a full season. But I think Utah's in the driver's seat to keep him and potentially keep him on a team-friendly deal. We'll see what materializes with the market, but I think it would probably be a pretty competitive, it would have to take a pretty competitive and high offer. I think for a team to get him, he's probably more in that like $25-30 million range. And that is a lot of money to invest in a player coming off of a serious injury that derailed nearly a full season. So I think if it's anything less than that, I don't think the Lakers are getting him. And he's probably just going to end up staying in Utah on a more team-friendly deal, but we'll see. All right. Eyes wide, heads high. Thank you for the super chat. Venture to guess what the new owner thinks about the current state of this team, coach, and front office. Well, I'll start with the last two. They gave JJ an extension right around, or right before the season, and that was around the time they were getting close to finalizing the deal. So clearly, I would go out on a limb here and say I assume they're not just giving extensions out without clearing it with the new ownership. Like one of the things, it's like, let's say you're selling a house, you're not going to go paint one of the walls like hot pink and then be like, hey, I know we're in the process of escrow and we're closing this deal, but I hope you don't mind. Just before you left, like I really like the color pink. I'm going to go paint this wall in the living room hot pink. Like, no, you're going to do everything in your power to make the situation as appealing to the buyer and the new owner as possible. So the fact that they extended JJ right before the season and the fact that they extended Rob earlier in the season when the original talks with Mark Walter began in January before even the Luka trade happened, and then they do the Luka trade, then they end up extending Rob after the season. Both of those things had to be cleared with Mark Walter. So I'm not going to speculate as to like how he views it now, but he clearly was on board to a large degree with Rob getting an extension and JJ getting an extension. I don't think, because we talked about like there's a theory out there that like maybe Genie just did that to kind of protect them before the ownership change. And I know some people have thought that, but I can't go that far just because I don't think that it would make a lot of sense to be like, hey, by the way, as we are closing this deal and you are considering what changes you want to make, we're going to lock in Rob and make you have to pay him if you want to fire him, and also lock in JJ and make you pay him if you want to fire him. That just doesn't really make sense in terms of closing the deal. So there had to be a certain level of optimism and belief in the front office and coaching staff coming off of last season and going into this season. I would say it's tough because, again, if we want to go back to what Rich said, if you want to look at it from a glass half full perspective, you can say, hey, there's been injuries. They haven't been fully healthy, yada, yada. And you could kind of talk yourself into that. So maybe there's some of that going on right now in terms of we don't know what this roster looks like fully healthy. The coaching staff hasn't had all their weapons. But I think in general, my understanding is things are positive right now. And I know some fans don't want to hear that. I know fans want heads to roll. But my understanding of the situation, again, like extensions even aside, is that things are in a positive place. Now, current state of the team, I think that one is a little murkier to me in terms of, again, I don't know how much the injuries and some of the public excuses they've had are weighing internally. I think there is some of that going on. But certainly if this continues for the next month, I think they are going to be at a crossroads in terms of, do we invest in this team for this season? Do we invest in this, or do we look toward next season? Or do we just keep the powder dry and go into the offseason and then make some moves there? So I would say, at least on the coaching and front office front, I still believe it's positive. And again, I continue to reference Dave McMenamin reporting on Alan Slewa's show that he expects JJ and Rob to be there for the next 5 years. I don't know if I'd go that far personally, but he clearly has heard that messaging. So, I think going off that, obviously that there's a certain level of confidence, but with the team, I think it's looking like they're not a true championship threat right now, but a lot can change in the next month. And then a lot could obviously change with the trade. So we'll see how that goes. Rando, thank you for the super chat. Jovan, please make the pain stop, please. I'm sorry. I wish I could. I think like the Lakers got to get healthy, and then I think got to play the right lineups and rotation, and also make some schematic changes, and then I think ultimately make a trade or two. And if they do that, I think we can be having this conversation in about 6 weeks in a much different place. But they're in a tough spot right now because they just have not really been competitive against good teams lately. And that is concerning. But the good news is that we have 1 day left in the year. So maybe new beginnings, New Year's resolutions. Maybe the team comes out with a different spirit and execution. Though again, I thought the spirit was good tonight for the most part. All right. Caught up with all the super chats, so I will be now going back through the trade questions. First one from Zach Wan. Thank you for super chat. Thought on Moody as a trade target and for how much? I like Moses Moody. I think that he would probably... so he's making 11.6, then 12.5, then 13.4. He seems to me to be a guy that the Warriors would want to keep, and I don't think you're just giving up the platter of Gabe or Maxey plus like a second. I don't know that he's worth a first. He is 23, which I like, and I do like Moody. I think right now he's more of a high-level bench player than a starter. On that contract, that's fine. You know, he's right there in like the non-taxpayer range, a little bit below that. But I don't. This is where the Lakers lack of assets. Like I would probably put him in like a similar range to a Keon and Ellis, and I would even say he's more proven than Keon Ellis. And if Sacramento's asking for a first for Keon, I would assume Golden State's asking for something similar. I don't know that with the Lakers makeup of like the roster and their assets that I would give up a first for Moody, but at the same time, I don't think you're just getting him for Gabe and a second or even a swap. Like again, the Lakers swaps are not entirely meaningless, but pretty close to, or not meaningless, worthless. They're not entirely worthless, but they're not viewed as these like super attractive assets that are going to really swing a trade. See, I just think a Moody trade is really difficult to be completely honest. Like if the Lakers had multiple seconds to play with, I would entertain that. But then again, if you're Golden State, like I think he's on a pretty reasonable contract. I don't think it would almost have to be a first round pick to even get them to entertain it. And that is probably too much in my opinion. Alma, thank you for the super chat. Hey, Jovan, ideal center prototype would be Khalil Ware. Ayton's lack of rebounding motor and physicality will lead to more paint blowouts. Feel we need a big body backup center. Example, Valanciunas, even Nurkic managed 26, 8, and 8 tonight, SMH. I agree with the last point for sure. That's been something I've been advocating for, is a more physical, defensive-minded, or defensive-minded, not Valanciunas and Nurkic particularly, but just a more physical, tough, burly, center option where Ayton, Hayes, and Kleba are all relatively on the thin side, relatively on the slim side, and not the most physically imposing or strongest players. They're all like relatively slender, and that I think we've seen be an issue at times against like Nurkic. Nurkic is a turnover machine and is a foul machine and can't move his feet, but he can push dudes around when he's in the paint. And we've seen him do that against the Lakers this season when they played the Jazz. So yeah, I agree. I don't know who exactly that guy is. Has been thrown out there, with the Lakers for a couple of years now has been Daron Sharp. I'd really like him as an option, but I don't think they need to necessarily replace Jackson. I just think it would be nice to have a different look at center potentially, or more optionality at center. I agree with Khalil Ware. I just don't think he's a realistic target for LA. I don't think that type of player is on the table. So, unless we're talking about an Austin trade, I don't. You're like, I would say this. I'd give up the first for Khalil Ware in a heartbeat. I just don't think. I would do a Dew in a first or Dalton in a first for Khalil Ware in a second. I just don't think that's close to enough for Miami. Tan Man, thank you for the super chat package for Sabonis, Monk, and Ellis for Ayton, Rui, etc. So I know people have been pushing for the Monk and Ellis deal. I continue to be on the side of, I think I just want Ellis. I don't want to base everything off of a game. It's just a reference point. But I thought, for example, like Nick Smith Jr. looked like just better than Malik Monk. And I don't think he's better than Malik Monk, to be clear. Don't take it there. But like, I just don't know what Malik Monk's role is on this team when they're at full strength. Now, he has injury insurance for Luka or for Austin, but I don't think he's closing. Like, I don't think he's closing games, and I don't think he's playing. I don't think you can play a lot of minutes with Austin, Malik, and Luka. Like, for as rough as the Rui minutes can be defensively sometimes with him as that fifth guy, if you replace him with Malik Monk, who's smaller and worse defensively, it's going to be even worse. And this is where I get to Sabonis. I think Sabonis is a really good player who is simultaneously very difficult to build around. So for as frustrating as Ayton can be sometimes in some of these big matchups, he is a better rim protector and defender than Sabonis. And I think if you there have been times and have been stretches when Ayton has covered for certain guys, or at least held his own as a rim protector and in the paint. Again, I think more so against the lesser teams, but still, there's been stretches. That is not Sabonis. Sabonis is one of the worst defensive bigs in the NBA, is very limited on that end, and I think would just make the Lakers defense completely flammable to the point of like just not working. And sure, the offense might go to a certain level where they might even end up being the best offense in the league. Let's just say, like, hypothetically, ceiling case scenario, or ceiling scenario, I think the defense to me would be locked in as bottom 5 in the NBA, and it's already there right now. But like, I think they'd be locked in lottery level, like worst in the NBA level defense. Sabonis, like, there's a huge gap in my opinion between Ayton and Sabonis, and just like I think there's a big gap between Ayton and like the top rim protectors, the best interior defenders. I think there's just as big of a gap, if not more, between Ayton and Sabonis. Like, Sabonis, he's just such a tough player to build around because he's so skilled offensively and so talented and so productive. And he's a really good rebounder, but not good at moving his feet, not good at blocking, altering shots, protecting the rim. And Sacramento is just really struck. Like, that's been one of their, I mean, they have not put a lot of defensive talent around him, but the Lakers also don't have like an embarrassment of defensive talent either. So yeah, I don't think that would work personally. All right. Couple more here. First one from David. Thank you for the super chat. Starters on, off, plus, minus have been underwhelming. LBJ is a small minus. Luka, Reeves are small pluses. Luka, Ball, high variance by nature, need impact player. So I think you're talking about the overall season. I mean, the overall season, like the starting group has, they're I think a minus 20 net rating on the season. So the one starting group, what's been interesting, and I don't really want to get into it or unpack this right now, but I think the best general framework for a lineup has been, at least based on the data we have up to this point in the season, has been Luka and Austin in the backcourt, either Marcus or Jake, more so Marcus, but to a lesser extent Jake in the front court as the defender, or Banshee, whatever you want to call it, Rui at the 4, and then Ayton or Jackson at the 5. That general framework of the 2 star guards, a defender, a shooter, and then a lob threat, offensive threat center, those lineups have tended to do really well, because the one starting group that has actually done really well in the season was the pre-LeBron return group of Luka, Austin, Marcus, Rui, and DA. That group actually played well. Now, the level of competition at times wasn't great. Some of that was against lottery teams, but that group on the season has performed really well. And then we've seen like the more recent full strength team or lineup not perform as well. And then to your point, yeah, like in terms of overall plus minus or net rating, LeBron's been a slight negative. Luka and Austin are slight positives. I mean, yeah, that's what I said earlier. Like I think the ideal outcome or the ideal way to really build this team up would just be adding one impact player into the group and not taking anything out. That's why I like any version of a Gabe, Maxey, Dalton, like those three guys being the most tradable or the most likely to be traded, I think makes sense on a lot of fronts, because even like, I don't think the Lakers have missed Gabe that much. I think there's been some matchups or stretches where they have missed him, but he's certainly the most expendable of the rotation guys. And if you can flip him and Maxey and Dalton and that salary of like low to mid 20s into an impact player, and really the only guy you're missing is Gabe, that's where I think, again, if you get like that fifth starter and then your top 9 or 10 is Rui, Marcus, Vando, Jake, Jackson, I like that top 10 a lot more, moving both Rui and Marcus into permanent bench roles. Like that just makes a lot more sense to me. But the guys that can check the box of like being available for the price of Gabe and Maxey and Dalton in like a second, I like that Venn diagram. I don't know if it even exists, right? So that's the question that they got to figure out. Shortcut to Scratch, thank you for the super chat. Trade DA for 3-and-D and go 5 out / centerless. Now you're talking JJ's language. This is music to JJ's ears. You know he would love this. I'm not there. I mean, in this case, if the Lakers were just going to do this hypothetical, I would say just start Jackson and then play, basically go back to last year's approach. And Jackson is the placeholder starter, plays 18, 20, 22 minutes a night, depending on performance, depending on foul trouble, etc. And then you go small the rest of the game. I would say I think this year's group is better equipped to go small, because if you just take it as Vando has a more permanent spot, I also think Vando's playing better right now than he played at this point or just in general last season. I think he's been better this year. And then like Jake, I guess, is the DFS replacement in terms of like small ball. And maybe that finally gets them to lean into a do. But then you also have Marcus, who you didn't really have, although I guess he's kind of the Jordan Goodwin replacement. But you have some of the key ingredients from last year's small ball success in this year's group. I think the two biggest things for me would just be, I'd be really concerned with the defensive rebounding and with the rim protection. And especially looking at, like, Jokic is about to be out for a few weeks, but at full strength, you have the behemoth front line of Jokic, Gordon, Johnson, with Watson off the bench, with Valanciunas off the bench. That's just a really big front line to have to contend with. Then you have Houston and Adams and Şengün and Durant and Smith and Thompson and Finney-Smith. Like, that's just a really big team. Then you have OKC with Hartenstein and Chet and J-Dub. And, they do play a little bit smaller. They're a little bit more quicker, but they have the two big look that they traditionally start with. You got Minnesota and their bigs. You got San Antonio and Wemby. So I just think, unfortunately for the Lakers, like, I would say most of the top of the West has like better interior situations and is also bigger, faster, quicker than them. With some exceptions in terms of maybe like the size, but they're definitely like more athletic and quicker, and then also have probably a better front court situation. So I just think it can work in certain matchups. I don't think you're going to the finals playing small ball anymore, especially because the Lakers also don't have the requisite shooting, I think, or like if you're going to go small full time, you want a certain level of athleticism and speed and shooting. The Lakers are below average in all three of those categories. So maybe a 3-and-D guy helps a little bit close that gap. But I still think even if you added Herb Jones, Andrew Wiggins, whoever, the Lakers are still below below average in terms of shooting, speed, and athleticism. So that's where it would have to be a much larger makeover, I think, of the roster. Rich, thank you for the super chat. Is this team, when fully healthy without LeBron, ideal? I don't think so. I still think because there was the stretch like right when LeBron got there where I thought the offense was leveling up and he was still finding his footing defensively, but LeBron as a short roll playmaker and in the post and out of the elbows and like horns actions and Lakers ran on some stack tonight that was really effective. I still think offensively they're scratching the surface of what they can be. But I think the tough spot that the Lakers are in is there's just a clear limitation to the big three defensively. And you have to put a certain amount of defense and athleticism around those three. And I just don't think they have the current roster construction to maximize those three. And that's the challenge right now. Because I don't know how you like. I think you could partially address that with the right 3-and-D trade that then slots in that like fourth guy next to the fourth perimeter guy in a nice way where he can complement and he can guard point guards, he could guard wings, he could guard a spectrum of players, and that's nice. Then everyone else is shifting to secondary players or lesser threats. Then you have Deandre as the center. What I will say with this is I think in general, the Lakers are probably better with two of the three stars on the floor rather than all three. I mean, that's just been, that's borne out with the lineup data, even going back to last season. So there's been a bit of just a ceiling there with the three stars together. I would contend that I would still like to see that. This is where we get back to the starting lineup discussion. And I feel like, to your point earlier about not being able to judge the team because of the injuries and what they've had, I also think it is tough for me to judge part of this just because I don't think they've maximized their lineups. And I think if you gave me a 10-game stretch with Marcus as the fifth starter and the team goes 5-5 and the starting group is like a slight minus or a slight positive and just isn't really that good, I will change my tune and be like, hey, I just don't even know if this is fixable at this point. Like they tried this, but they haven't even tried that in terms of playing another defender next to the big three consistently. And that's where I'm like, if you're just doing this, switching everything defense and hoping that you're getting a certain performance from them defensively, like I just think you're setting yourself up to fail to a degree. So that's been the frustrating part for me is I don't think we've seen, I'll say that I don't think we've seen the big three maximized. And I think a big part of that has been the roster, but also the lineup construction around them, I think has not made sense in my opinion. But yeah, I don't think that. I think my answer here is more so I just think they're better with two of the three. 10-man, AR, Rui, and Gabe for AD, Clay, and Marshall. That's an interesting one. Just upset Dallas fans again, although it'd probably like getting AR. I think ultimately where I come down on this trade is there's just a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty with AD and his availability and his health. And sure, if you told me, if you could guarantee AD is going to be healthy for the next 50 games and the playoffs, I would take his ceiling above Austin's, because especially just based on the Lakers roster construction and like what if they could make DA a bench big or even start and play AD at the 4, which, would come with some spacing concerns, but at least like have a certain level of size and rebounding and go back to that too big look that they had in 2020, that OKC has, that some other teams have. You could sell me on that, but Austin's injured right now, but in general, Austin has been pretty healthy for most of his career. He's been something of an Iron Man. and we'll get the little nicks and knacks occasionally, but he pretty much is playing 70 plus games every season. That's not the case for AD. So I just would have a lot of pause with trading for AD and him potentially going down. And now you're just in a really tough spot, to say nothing of like the longer term concern with like how he's going to age, how his body's going to hold up longer term. He's up for an extension that he's going to want to get, which is going to be another factor of, do you want to pay this dude 60 plus million going into his late 30s? Like, I don't feel great about that. So like, relatively, like, would you rather have AD at like 65 million or Austin at 40 million? I'd rather have Austin at 40 million, but you could disagree with that. It's a fun hypothetical, but I don't think these two teams are going to trade with each other, or if they do, it's probably on a smaller scale. But I think if I'm trading Austin for another star, I don't mind trading him for another star big, but I would want a younger player. I would want a healthier player, and I'd probably want a better contract situation. Really nice point here from Rich. I'm going to take a quick swig of water. Rich says, our bubble team was the prototype for today's NBA. Yes. That's the crazy thing, is that the Lakers at the time, remember the whole I remember it very clearly. The whole, like, who's the third scorer? The Lakers don't have enough offense. They don't have enough shooting, this and that. But the one thing I will note that made the Lakers a little bit of an exception is, like, they had 2 top 5 players. So you can't plan or have it's just like part of that was, I don't want to say like happenstance, but they had the best player or arguably the best player in the world decide to sign there. And then they traded for another top 5 player, and they had something special where you just, we could go through, Kobe and Shaq, MJ and Pippen, Magic and Kareem for probably a stretch there, and KD and Steph and LeBron and Dwayne Wade. And like, in most of these situations, like a year or two, I think Kobe and Shaq was obviously extended for several years, but you get these little windows of having 2 top 5 players on the same team, and it often results in a championship, just because that, like, the concentration of talent there is so special. So that was certainly, I just wanted to note that was like a factor of, I think a lot of teams are doing these 2-star builds with size and with depth and with energy and defensive tenacity and all that stuff. And that's what the Lakers had. But I think the one difference between them and some of these other teams is, like, they had 2 top 5 guys in LeBron and AD, and either one of those guys could be the best player in the world on a given night, during that season. But yeah, I mean, the double big versatility, but also the versatility to play 1 big and like a 4, or also 1 big and even go a little bit smaller. Then having a bunch of 2-way athletes, a bunch of, and also kind of trusting the process of, you're going to generate a certain quality of shot that even if the player isn't like the best shooter or like a sort of shaky shooter, that in a playoff setting, they can make enough shots to keep a defense honest or penalize them for playing off of them. So yeah, I completely agree with this. Going to go 5 more minutes and then I will wrap here. So if you guys got any questions in the chat, let's get those in. Kane Carter, hey Jovan, hot take. Go for guys on contracts. For example, Patrick Williams would be elevated next to Luka and LeBron, especially if it helps you get off Vando and get seconds plus Io or Okoro. Depending on the trade, I would be interested in this. I don't love the Patrick Williams contract situation. I think he's a little overpaid, and I'm not quite sure that he's the ideal fit starter, for example. And I think he's pretty much making close to starter money. So, maybe you could find a steal or something, or get a bargain 3-and-D guy that ends up playing above him. But to me, he's more of a mid to high level bench guy, depending on the season, but not a full-time starter, in my opinion. Connor Phillips says, I feel like we were talking about the 3-point shooting earlier in the year. There are just bigger problems right now. The 3-point shooting is still a big problem, but I think clearly defense and athleticism are bigger problems. G says that Jovan, I'm in LA for the next 2 games and flying back to Washington State after. Do you still do meetups? Also, any recs of what to do during my stay? I have been meeting up with fans who reach out to me on Instagram that are at the games. Unfortunately, I will not be at the next 2 games because it'll be the last couple days that my son is here. So Friday is like the second to last day, and then Sunday I'm flying him back. So unfortunately, I will not be at the 2 Memphis games. I'll still be covering them, but I think the Sunday one I'll be doing Monday morning, but the Friday one I'll be doing Friday night. In terms of but next time so Washington State. So I'm familiar with Washington State, next time you're out here, just hit me up on Instagram and would love to meet up at a game. In terms of recs of what to do during your stay, depends where you're staying. So it's hard for me to give a proper answer without knowing where you're staying, but certainly in the downtown area, you got to check out LA Live. Like it is a touristy thing to do, but I think that's natural that's right there, especially like ahead of the game. I think that would be an easy thing to do, but it's tough to say. I mean, I'm trying to think of like LA touristy things. I would say go to the beach for sure if you can, if you're within a certain distance. I would say check out like Griffith Observatory, depending on if you've been to Hollywood or not. Like I think Hollywood, like actual Hollywood, is a little bit overrated, and a lot of parts of it are run down. But walking on Hollywood or walking on Sunset, depending on the area, like there is like you've seen it in movies, and it is nice to see it in person and see like the Walk of Fame and stuff, and just do like a bunch of touristy stuff. But yeah, I would say the beach is a must, especially coming from Washington State. And then I really like Griffith Observatory, even if you're Angelino, just it's always a good time over there. But I would say that. Then I would also say you can do the touristy stuff of like going to Hollywood or something like that. But yeah, I would say that those are like 3 things off the top of my head without knowing where you're staying. Whoa. Kate Carter, Yova, do you feel California should get split into 2 different states like the Carolinas? Because if you know, NorCal and SoCal are nothing alike. Feels like 2 different states. I'm not going to go down the politics road. I mean, this isn't necessarily a political question. I don't think so. I don't have an issue with traveling between the 2 parts of the state. So, I don't think so. But I mean, if they wanted to, I wouldn't have I wouldn't have an issue with it. But you get a whole other conversation is like if LA should, if California should, be its own thing. Also, I want to go to the beginning. It's going to be hard for me to get all the way back to the beginning of the chat, but I'm not going to make it. But Colts had the best opening comment of that he got CT from the 4th quarter. That was the best. That was the best thing. Now we're devolving into state lines. Any final questions before we wrap here? Eccentric says one of Braun's turnovers was Maxey moving out of his spot, but the stats are so linear and doesn't capture. Yeah, I mean, look, I mentioned that during the Luka and LeBron section that it wasn't people are going to look at the 13 turnovers and just say it's all on them. And that's a perfect example of, I remember vividly, where Maxey was cutting along the baseline and the timing was off between LeBron and Maxey. And I think LeBron might have thought he was staying in the corner, and Maxey ended up cutting, and then he threw the ball. He wasn't there. It went out of bounds, and that's on both players. So again, I'm not to be clear, I'm not absolving LeBron or Luka of their turnovers. They both had too many turnovers, and they both need to be better in that regard. And they both have struggled to varying degrees in some of these losses to these more athletic teams with their turnovers. But certainly it's also on the supporting cast. Chuck Dangler says, it's the end of the year. I just want to say thanks for your work this year, Brate. Thank you guys. And I think this is a great place to wrap here. I just want to say, like, for those who are tuning in right now, it's past 1:30 a.m. on Wednesday, and you guys are tuning in after another blowout loss. And I get the frustration. I understand it all. But I really appreciate you guys for another great year. This is going on almost 2 years of having this show, this YouTube channel, and having the Late Night Gang. And just the decision, I mean, on a personal note, like the decision to leave a few months ago and go fully independent, take this leap of faith, was not an easy one. It was one I was weighing for basically the first 8 months of the year. And then actually taking that leap the last few months has been incredible, and bigger and better things are ahead. I'm really looking forward to 2026 and continuing to do Beyond the Block and growing that out and having bigger guests and just doing that show more frequently. But we also have merch coming. I promise merch is coming. There's been a bit of a holdup that's been out of my control, but I'm gonna kind of just move forward. And if the thing that I had been working on works out at some point, then we will do that. But for now, I'm moving in a different direction and gonna have the merch. Obviously, I have the memberships. Probably going to be changing those a little bit at some point here in January, and just continuing to grow this all out. So I just wanted to take a moment here to thank you all. Thank the Late Night Gang. Thank the chat. Even if you disagree with me, even if you think Austin should come off the bench, or the Lakers should trade Austin and I'm an idiot, or you think Rui should start and I'm an idiot, whatever you think, I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate the love. I appreciate the hate. And I just appreciate you guys. So this is great. And I just can't wait for the future. But of course, the present is great as well. Scam Swish says, thank you for the super chat. We love you, but the Lakers need to play the young guys. That's a message I can get behind. But I appreciate BC with a note here. Membership should come with weekly members only live streams where we can join the screen on StreamYard. That is a good note. And I've been considering something like that. I don't know if weekly is possible, but I'm definitely bi-weekly, I think, is like a starting point. And then maybe I can stretch that into being weekly. FC Loading says, not even trolling. I'd love to develop a career like Jovan. Thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot. And Civic Citizen says, I think we can all agree Buha's an idiot. LOL, JK. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. But happy New Year to everybody. And I hope you all have a great rest of your year. We'll close with this one from Julian in the Philippines. From the Philippines, do you think Luka's situation will affect his career, like shifting teams or requesting a trade after the season because of what's happening with his team? I don't think so. I mean, look, Luka's career has been shifted. I think it's been ultimately a positive shift. We've seen that he was already one of the biggest and most popular players in the league. It's gone to a different level being a Laker, right? Like I think he really, I made this point now a couple times this week. I think he's making a real case to be the face of the NBA. And we've been having this discussion of who's the next face of the NBA after LeBron, after Steph, after KD. Luka, jersey sales, leading All-Star voting, most viewed NBA player on social media. Like his career trajectory is going in a different direction in terms of like the stardom and just like Luka, the brand, Luka, the entity. He's also been having a career year in certain categories and putting up career high numbers. Obviously, the season right now is not trending exactly the way that he or the Lakers want it to, but there's still time for that to turn around. There's still time for them to make a move. But I mean, certainly like requesting a trade does then alter that path. If that were to happen, I do not foresee that happening. He just signed the extension. I think if anything, it'll be, okay, we have Luka, like we need to change piece X or piece Y or piece Z. We need to change this thing about the roster, but not Luka. And I think it's going to be a long-term partnership here. But with all that said, though, I appreciate you guys and Happy New Year. The next time I will talk to you, well, for those who watch Lakers Collective, I'll be on tomorrow morning. We're going at 11 a.m., so I'll talk to you guys then. But for everybody else, I'll be back on January 1st with a new episode. We'll be doing a new state of the Lakers, talking about 10 storylines from the past 11 games, because technically they're at the 31 game mark. But appreciate you all. Happy New Year. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to you all. Happy New Year. I appreciate you deeply, and I will talk to you all very soon.